Hello beautiful people, first of all I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who watched my last video about massive discographies. At the time of recording it's at around 1000 views, and thanks to your support I was able to buy these sunglasses worth $5,900 and this blue raspberry prime hydration drink. I guess I'm officially a YouTuber now. In this video I want to talk about a small Swedish startup you may have heard of called Spotify. In case you don't know, Spotify is a platform where you can listen to music from all your favorite artists for free, with ads included, or for a small monthly fee of $16.99 a month without ads. I actually really like ads, so I don't mind that pricing model at all. Product placement is what fuels our society, so maybe we should stop complaining so much and start buying more stuff. They've also got this cool green logo which looks kind of like sound waves. But banter aside, it's pretty hard to talk about the music industry these days without talking about Spotify. There are plenty of other videos which go over the problematic aspects of Spotify, but I'm going to add another one to the list because the topic of online fraud is one that I find fascinating and is fairly relevant to my own situation as an independent artist trying to be heard amidst the noise. Personally, I've never been that interested in Spotify as a user. Instead, I prefer to discover and listen to music on YouTube, and I always got these bad vibes from Spotify for some reason. I don't know, I just find the user interface really unappealing, and I don't like how it pushes so many random songs into your listening experience. I only just recently bought a premium subscription, and to be honest, I don't think I'll continue it as it hasn't really provided much benefit for me given how little I use the platform. However, as a writer and producer of music, I have to pay attention to Spotify, and I have a bunch of music on there myself via music distributors. In this video, I want to list and summarize 3 scams which have been prevalent on the platform in the past, and appear to still be an issue to this day. Luckily, I haven't been directly affected by these issues myself, but as we'll see, these issues do indirectly affect every artist and listener on the platform in some way. One of my main intentions with this video is to help small independent artists understand exactly how Spotify makes things incredibly difficult for the little guy by allowing for certain kinds of unethical gaming of their platform, even if they like to pretend otherwise. Most artists understand that things are stacked against them on a basic level, but it's not always clear exactly how and why Spotify creates a very unfair system for newcomers. It's true that things have always been difficult in the music industry for emerging artists to break through and have their voice heard, even before platforms like Spotify existed. But a key difference in this era is the monetization aspect. Spotify scams make things hard for the smaller artists by making expectations for financial success even more unrealistic for them in terms of streaming numbers. It's unfortunate because streaming revenue is a very significant portion of what most artists earn these days according to the data. I wouldn't know as I actually don't make any money off streaming revenue yet, but I'm sure I'm not alone here. However, in an attempt to provide a neutral perspective here, I'll say that I do think Spotify is still a great service for distributing your music if you're not concerned about income from it at all. It does have very powerful features for managing your catalog and allowing users to listen to your music in a very convenient fashion. It's just that those features may come at a bit of a cost if you are interested in making money directly off people listening to your music and you don't have an easy way to amass a very large audience. Be that an audience of actual humans or robots, because as we'll discover in this video, it doesn't always matter exactly where those revenue generating streams come from. Also, keep in mind that high streaming numbers don't just translate to revenue. They can also help create the perception that an artist is really big and blowing up, even when the reality of their audience might not be quite what you'd expect. Now, just so I don't come across as someone who's mad because they're not a rich megastar with billions of streams themselves here, I want to clarify that I'm under no pretenses about the reality of making money off my own music, Spotify or no Spotify. The truth of the matter is that monetization of music has always been extremely difficult, except for a select few who get lucky or are well established within the industry, and Spotify hasn't really changed this fact much since its inception. It's true that there have been success stories from artists who've managed to accumulate massive amounts of streams through the platform and give themselves a greatly increased chance of a successful career. And since I'm from New Zealand, I'll add a few artists to the screen here who even us New Zealanders may not have heard of. But for your average independent artist, Spotify alone is simply not a good prospect for a career. A comparison here is YouTube, which is more plausible to make money off than Spotify, although it's still not an easy source of income by any means. In my experience, the YouTube algorithm is also easier to navigate than Spotify. Spotify doesn't give many free handouts for that valuable discovery they provide. Yes, there are editorial playlists, but these can be difficult to get on for many artists, and there's only a limited number of slots available. Again, it could be said that this is due to the competitive nature of the music industry, which existed prior to Spotify. But Spotify hasn't really helped this situation too much in my opinion. The numbers when it comes to income earned from the platform are pretty revealing in this case. However, there's more to this narrative than just streaming revenue payouts being low. A more juicy part of the story, which I was quite surprised to find out upon deeper investigation, is that a lot of fraud has been committed on the Spotify platform. To some people, this will be blindingly obvious and nothing new at all. I mean, hasn't the music industry always been involved in shady business practices right from the beginning? But I still think it's useful to understand the true nature of this fraud. It's easy for us to sit here and yell at the green logo for screwing over artists, but unless we outline the actual issues, it's all just a bunch of hot air. So I did some research and found 3 clear examples of fraud on the platform, which it seems that Spotify is either complicit with or even actively participating in. Just to cover my own tracks here a bit, I want to point out that it's not entirely clear to what extent Spotify is involved in all these schemes, although they do obviously run the platform, so you'd hope they'd have at least some control. They don't want people to think that they're the bad guys in any way, shape or form, so they do everything they can to divert attention away from the schemes I'm about to go over. But it does seem pretty obvious that Spotify has financial incentives to either ignore or encourage certain behaviors which take listening potential away from real hardworking artists who serve as the core creative offering of the platform and redirect this listening potential towards certain money pits. Yep, it all boils down to money. So it's capitalism, which is really the bad apple here. Not too mind-blowing, I know. However, I still think that Spotify could be doing a lot more to mitigate the damage caused by these scams. It seems that they have been trying to do this to some extent, as shown by recent announcements from them, but are they actually solving the issues, or is it just some low-effort face saving on their behalf? Let's dive into an unholy trinity of Spotify scams and see if we can decipher what's really going on. Our first item on the list is most likely not something that Spotify is actively participating in, but it does seem that Spotify has created conditions which are conducive to the fraud. Hacked accounts have been an issue for many users in the past, with some even filming the behavior to observe what is actually happening.
And I noticed that they were going through different catalogs, kind of like impersonating me. And it was music that I never heard of before and it just seemed odd.
But how do these accounts get hacked? One answer is that Spotify hasn't made two-factor authentication mandatory for login, and this allows for opportunistic hackers to hijack compromised accounts and use them to generate streams. Very clever and very annoying for those users who just want to listen to their favorite tunes. One method is called credential stuffing, where third-party services get a list of hacked passwords from other websites and rely on the passwords being the same across multiple accounts. Now, it would be easy to blame the user here for using the same password across accounts, but the thing is that Spotify could at least attempt to address the issue by requiring two-factor authentication. At the time of recording, Spotify hasn't required two-factor authentication on user logins, although they do strongly encourage it in their support documents. There was an article reporting about the problem of hacked accounts as recently as April this year, and Spotify said it wasn't aware of the issue. However, the company's official customer support account on X has responded to multiple people who posted about the problem, although the article also says that these may be automated replies. There's a Reddit thread from 3 months ago complaining about their account being hacked and a bunch of random artists being saved on it, and in the comments there's some people who say the same thing happened to them. What might be happening under the hood here? Well, there are a bunch of third-party services which allow paid-for streams, and these may use hacked accounts to provide these streams. It's pretty easy to find services which sell Spotify streams. I just googled the term pay for Spotify streams and found a bunch of sites. Here's just a few. The sites actually have some interesting information about buying streams. Take Social Boosting as an example. Now, there's no information I could find on their site explaining how they get these bought streams. It makes sense that they want to keep their secret recipe in the vault. It may be hacked accounts that they're using to generate streams, or it may be the next item in our unholy trinity of Spotify scams. There are actually videos of people posting their bot farms on the internet and explaining how you can make your own, which I find kind of amusing. I guess this is a grey area when it comes to YouTube's content policies, but I don't see why it should be. It's so obviously fraud and Spotify knows it too. This is from Spotify's own website. Spotify strictly prohibits using any third-party service that promises streams or playlist placement in exchange for money. In fact, they have a whole section of their website dedicated to combating fake streams. So they're well aware of the issue and they say they want to tackle it. Also from the website, as a new deterrent, beginning early next year, we will start charging labels and distributors per track when flagrant artificial streaming is detected on their content. This is an interesting strategy because it shows how Spotify is sneakily able to pass the buck to someone else. It's the distributor's fault, not ours. But how easy is it for the distributor to actually detect streaming fraud? DistroKid is the largest distributor and hosts the most music, but it doesn't seem to have the resources to adequately deal with this issue. This is where I'd like to mention a musician by the name of Ben Jordan, who has actually been a victim of this whole fake streaming debacle. He had all of his 23 albums removed by his distributor TuneCore when they were flagged for fake streams. Here's a video about this, which you can watch if you want. Maybe you've already seen it. And to be honest, he has a lot more experience with this whole Spotify distributor thing than me, so his content is probably better than mine when it comes to this issue. Also, you should check out his most recent album, Curly and Tapes V.10, which is a great electronic instrumental album with some awesome musicianship on it. But you're stuck here with me for the time being, so let's finish off this video. A concern of mine as an independent artist uploading my music and receiving a low number of streams is getting put on a botted playlist without my consent or getting incorrectly flagged as having botted streams and this resulting in my music getting taken down. If this can happen to an artist as big as Ben Jordan, who actually makes a living off their music, then what hope is there for someone with no name for themselves? So I would actually be concerned if my music started getting a whole bunch of streams from nowhere and I didn't know where these were coming from, as maybe there would be bots involved. There's also some evidence that a lot of big artists get botted streams, either with or without their knowledge, and it seems that in most cases they're given a free pass because obviously it would be a big controversy and an inconvenience for both them and Spotify if they were flagged for whatever reason. Unknown artists don't really have a voice here, and according to Ben Jordan, there are in fact a large number of artists who have had their music incorrectly flagged as having botted streams. He says he was contacted by dozens of them after he shared his own story. It would be easy for us to blame the unknown artist here by saying that they're lying and that they were actually using botted streams. For example, it would be easy for me to accuse Ben Jordan of knowingly using botted streams behind everyone's back, but I really don't think that this is what is happening in every case. Ben doesn't explicitly deny using botted streams, maybe because he thinks that that claim is outlandish and he would never think of doing that, but the unfortunate fact of the matter is that big artists and labels have almost certainly used botted streams in the past. This creates a blatantly unfair situation for small artists, who not only struggle to compete with inflated stream numbers, but also find it difficult to use any inflation methods themselves because there's a good chance that they'll be beaten down by Daddy Spotify and the distributors, given that they're a relative nobody. Maybe some artists can slip through the cracks and get away with bots, but is it really worth the risk and the stress? It's kind of like you're entering a marathon where all the other guys don't just have more experience and resources, but also are all on PEDs. This is not a fun situation at all for new emerging artists, and what's more, you could be disqualified if you dare try the easy leg up yourself. In fact, the situation is even worse than this, because you might end up accidentally taking the PADs without knowing it by being put on one of these botted playlists. I guess the best thing to do is to remain alert and stay on top of exactly where your streams are coming from. But it's a bit annoying to think that you could unknowingly pick up some inorganic streams and get wiped from the platform without any say in the matter. Fortunately for Ben Jordan, he had enough sway to get his music reinstated by his distributor TuneCore after contacting them about the issue, but it seems that there's quite a few artists who haven't been so lucky. I hope the bot army won't come for me or you. Maybe if we pray to the green logo, we'll be safe. Anyway, let's move to the final piece of our unholy trinity, our new overlords. The looming societal dangers of AI, a necessary ingredient in any dystopian novel, and Spotify has decided that it wants to contribute to the story of our modern society becoming Skynet. Okay, that might be a slight exaggeration, as the AI artists don't have weapons, yet. Instead, they just inflict a bunch of mediocre cookie-cutter music on us, designed to generate streaming revenue in place of real artists. Now before you start yelling at me for being some copium-huffing Luddite, let me say that I'm not an anti-AI absolutist. I think that it can be a useful tool in certain contexts, and obviously it can save a lot of time when it comes to quick and easy generation of randomized data. But I'm not really convinced that entire artist catalogs fall under the useful category. However, it depends what you mean by useful here. If you're talking about the ability to take streaming revenue from artists and put it into Spotify's or an opportunistic company's pockets instead, then AI can be a very useful thing indeed. But how does Spotify do this exactly? This is a bit of a complex rabbit hole, and it requires us to understand a key point about the way Spotify runs its platforms. Basically, Spotify can drive listeners to songs due to the fact that it's in full control of how it presents music to listeners. There's a distinction to be made between active and passive listeners. Active listeners will seek out what they like, and passive listeners will listen to what gets served up by the algorithm. Spotify claims that the majority of streams on the platform come from active listeners in one report from 2021, but they haven't divulged much further information about the exact nature of the split. This is probably data that they prefer to keep close to their chest, and we should understand that Spotify has an incentive to say that most of its users are active listeners when it comes to responding to artists who complain about their music not being pushed by Spotify's algorithms. If Spotify's algorithms aren't actually that useful because most users will seek out what they want to listen to anyway, Spotify has a good way to pass the buck on to artists when their music doesn't get listened to. But it's pretty obvious how powerful algorithms are when it comes to shaping content consumption, and there's no reason to think that music on Spotify wouldn't be included here. Think about YouTube, where most people are probably going to take videos off their recommended page. Why would Spotify be any different? I mentioned at the start of this video that I don't actually use Spotify much, so I don't have much personal experience with how effective its recommendation algorithm is and how much of people's listening diet consists of recommended music. But at scale, surely the influence of a recommended algorithm would be fairly significant. After all, Spotify has 601 million users at the time of this recording, and I'd be willing to bet that a significant proportion of those are even real humans and not bot farms. Anyway, there's a more general problem of fake artists to address here. There's some evidence that Spotify is involved in generating royalties from fake artists who are all linked to just a handful of companies or people. There's a few artists who seem to have fake personas that may be linked to Spotify, and one of these is Johan Raw. Johan Raw is apparently the person behind more than 650 artists that have accumulated more than 15 billion streams, making him Sweden's most played artist. But wait, there's more. In 2022, a Swedish newspaper called Dagens Nyheter investigated a label called Firefly Entertainment. DN uncovered 830 fake artists associated with Firefly, 495 of which are featured on Spotify's own playlists. I should point out that this could be considered a separate issue from AI-generated artists, as it's not clear to what extent AI is involved. But whatever the case, it does seem like Spotify has allowed for a bunch of artists who post low-effort deceptive content that seems to be made entirely for streaming revenue purposes. Whether or not that music is AI-generated isn't really even the main point in my opinion. What matters here is that the origin of the music is deceptive, and there are potential conflicts of interest with how Spotify picks certain artists. Now, dodgy curation is nothing new in the music industry, and a cynical response might be that this sort of thing is standard with or without Spotify, but I think that's a bit of a cop-out, and it implies that nothing can be done to improve conditions for emerging artists who struggle to compete with established industry players. It's possible to make things fairer, and there's question marks around whether Spotify is doing everything it can, or whether it only cares about the money. Its founders have marketing backgrounds, so I'm sure they're no strangers to gaming people's attention spans for money, and cutting certain corners might just be standard business practice for them. It's not a massive leap of imagination to think that they would allow for AI artists to be put on their playlists, and that they might even have their own AI artists lined up ready to generate some quick and easy royalty money through shell companies. There are many other recent examples of low-effort AI content on the platform to game Spotify's algorithms and generate streaming content, and even though these may not be directly linked to Spotify, it doesn't appear that Spotify cares too much about the potential issues that this could cause in terms of content pollution. Many users are already beginning to notice a decline in the quality of music getting offered up by the platform. All of this isn't too surprising given Spotify CEO Daniel Ek's public stance on AI. By the way, my name's Daniel, and I just want to say that you're ruining it out here for all of us Daniels, Mr. Ek. Daniel Ek apparently doesn't believe that AI should be used to impersonate artists, but he doesn't seem to see much of an issue with AI artists being created and distributed for a profit on the platform. But isn't all AI kind of impersonation? Data for AI songs is obtained from existing artists, and obviously there is the possibility that AI artists steal attention away from real artists who put a lot of effort into their music. Now, it seems that there's been a lot of public backlash against AI artists recently, so maybe they're not as much of a threat as they appear to real hardworking musicians. If audiences aren't interested in AI artists, then they're unlikely to take off in any meaningful way. Of course, there's one type of audience that we know is always interested. So maybe we should just let the robots have some downtime and chill out to some cool tunes. However, personally I don't think that the internet will be overrun by bots anytime soon. The more pressing issue that Spotify faces is content pollution. If the music gets increasingly low quality due to AI artists and low effort music which flood recommendation algorithms, people will simply move elsewhere to listen to music. I think many musicians will rejoice if this were to happen, provided that the next big platform's payouts weren't even lower than Spotify's. Apple Music pays more than Spotify per stream, so maybe it'll have better staying power, but I'm not so sure that it has the consumer market share to take over Spotify in the near future. I don't know what the situation is on Apple Music when it comes to bot farms and AI, but maybe that's a topic for another video. I hope you found this video interesting, and I'd like to end it on an optimistic note. If you can find other sources of income which aren't Spotify streams as an artist, then you'll be in a great position to use Spotify as a platform to offer something for free to your users. Essentially, it can act as a kind of marketing tool in service of other offerings, such as physical merch, where people can easily check out your music and see if they like you or not. In addition to this, if you're in the privileged position where you don't need to make money off your music, yet you still enjoy creating it, you can just post your music to Spotify and other platforms via distributor for yourself and other people to enjoy without worrying about your streaming numbers. Don't let the bots get you down. Cyberpunk dystopian capitalism is totally tolerable if you have enough money, and if you don't, well, maybe start your own bot farm? Also, if you're not a robot, go check out my music on streaming platforms such as Spotify or here on YouTube. It's totally free, and if you enjoy it, I'd really appreciate it if you can spread the word, as every set of ears listening to my music supports me on my own journey as an independent artist. I've got an album coming out later this year called Godhead Primacy, and a couple of singles from the album are released already. I'll be rolling more singles out over the course of this year, and consider subscribing if you want updates, or if you're just interested in more content like this. Bye bye.